There, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel, your cozy corner of the internet, where nostalgia meets nap time. Before we drift into 2 hours of iconic Pokémon moments you forgot existed, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it down in the comments below. Seriously, it's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. Last week, someone commented from a treehouse in Oregon. Top that if you can. All right. Lights low, blankets up, and if you have a Pikachu plush nearby, now's the time to give it a hug. Let's get this nostalgia train rolling. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably claim you're totally fine and emotionally stable, until someone casually reminds you about Butterfree's goodbye episode. Oh, yeah, that one. The one where Ash, our boy with the cap and the undying optimism, decides to let his beloved Butterfree fly off with a pink Butterfree to start a new life. And just like that, we all started questioning the meaning of attachment before we could even spell existential crisis. I mean, come on. The look in Pikachu's eyes alone was enough to ruin your whole week back in the day. And speaking of tearjerkers, let's not forget the time when Ash literally turned to stone in Mewtwo Strikes Back. And there's a certain age where you realize, wait, this was a kid's movie? Because nothing says Saturday morning fun like watching your favorite character turn into a lawn ornament while Pikachu desperately zaps him back to life. Every time I rewatch it, I wonder if Pikachu was charging him like an old Game Boy. Blip, blip, still nothing. Oh, and how about Pikachu's goodbye? You remember that forest full of wild Pikachu that made Ash consider letting his own best friend stay behind? Like, bro, Ash, what are you doing? You trained this Pikachu, survives Team Rocket's nonsense daily, and you're ready to abandon him for some strangers in the woods. Absolute betrayal. Thankfully, Pikachu stayed, probably because he realized no other trainer was dumb enough to constantly run into exploding balloons. And don't even get me started on Misty's farewell. That bicycle debt finally caught up to her. And just like that, she was gone. She left her friends, her battles, and poor Brock, who would never again get roasted for flirting with every nurse and officer on the continent. Classic Misty move. Oh, and yes, Brock leaving too. Multiple times. Honestly, that guy had more exits and comebacks than a soap opera character. You half expected him to leave a dramatic note. Gone to pursue my dreams. Be back after the next gym badge. These are the moments that quietly broke our tiny hearts and made us all realize that Pokémon wasn't just about catching them all. It was about feeling all the feelings. And with that, let's gently float our way into some of the eeriest, creepiest episodes the Pokémon world ever threw at us. You know, the episodes that made you think twice about watching with the lights off. Grab that blanket tight. Here we go. All right, sleepyhead's time to get a little misty-eyed. And no, I don't mean Misty the character, though she'll be showing up in this segment too. You see, Pokémon wasn't just a show about catching little monsters in colorful balls. Oh no, it was a carefully designed emotional roller coaster disguised as a Saturday morning cartoon. And tonight, we're strapping back in. Let's kick it off with one of the all-time soul crushers, Butterfree's goodbye. I swear no one warned us about this one. 1 minute, Butterfree's happily using sleep powder, and the next, he's head over wings for a pink Butterfree. And what does Ash do? Does he cry? Does he selfishly keep his buddy around? Nope. Our boy Ash does the mature thing, he lets him go. And just like that, Butterfree flies off into the sunset while we're left emotionally wrecked. And don't act like you didn't tear up. Even Pikachu looked like he was holding it together by a thread. I remember watching it as a kid, thinking, this is fine. I'm fine. Meanwhile, my heart was breaking faster than a Pokeball on a level 100 Gengar. Now, while we're on the topic of emotional trauma, let's revisit Mewtwo Strikes Back. The very moment when Ash, in true Ash fashion, decides to charge into a battle between god-tier legendary Pokemon and gets himself turned into stone. I mean, Ash, buddy, what was the plan there? What exactly were you hoping to accomplish by running between two psychic beams? Pikachu's reaction still haunts me. That desperate little zap-zap on Ash's stone body. The other Pokemon starting to cry, and you know it's serious when Charizard cries, and then the combined tears of all those Pokemon bring him back to life. Who knew we were signing up for a full emotional meltdown at age 9? And as if that wasn't enough, the anime decided to really test our limits with Pikachu's goodbye. Picture it, a forest full of wild Pikachu, all happily frolicking without a single care in the world. And Ash, poor, emotionally compromised Ash, starts wondering If maybe Pikachu would be happier with his own kind. Sir, have you met your own Pokémon? Pikachu can literally cook, team. Rocket with a thunderbolt, snuggle in your backpack, and eat your snacks all in one afternoon. No way he's leaving you for a bunch of tree hoppers. But there Ash is, making the sad speech, walking away while dramatic music plays, and Pikachu's just standing there with those big, watery eyes. And then, in a move that still makes me cheer every time Pikachu sprints after Ash, full anime slow-motion style, jumps into his arms, and the world is okay again. Cue the soft glow of happiness, as if the universe knew we couldn't handle another. Goodbye. And then, there's Misty's farewell. Now this one stung a little differently. Misty was the big sister, a no-nonsense one. The girl who kept Ash and Brock from making terrible decisions like challenging legendaries with a Caterpie. When she finally left the group to return to her gym, it felt like the squad would never be the same. The worst part? It all started because of that one cursed bicycle. Debt. Yes, that ancient, charred, electrocuted bike from episode 1. You'd think they could just give her a new one, but no. The anime gods said, let her go. And let's talk about Brock. Oh, Brock, the man, the myth, the legend of shameless flirting. He left not once, but multiple times. Usually for a girl, sometimes to follow a dream, and occasionally because the writers needed to reset the party dynamics. Every time he left, you knew it wasn't permanent, but it still stung. The campfire felt a little emptier, and no one was there to roast Ash for his life choices or hopelessly hit on Officer Jenny for the 100th time. The beauty of these tear-jerker moments wasn't just in the sadness, it was in how they snuck up on us. 1 minute you're watching Pikachu electrocute Team Rocket for the 50th time, and the next you're contemplating the fragility of relationships and the pain of letting go. It made those silly episodes with exploding hot air balloons and outlandish disguises mean something. Because in between the laughs, there were lessons about friendship, loyalty, and sometimes saying goodbye. And now, with the tissues slightly damp and your heartstrings tugged just enough, we're ready to move on. Time to dim those emotional lights and step into the darker, spookier corners of the Pokémon world. That's right, those eerie episodes you swore you'd forgotten, but your subconscious remembers. All right, sleepyheads, we've cried our eyes out over Butterfree and Misty's farewells. But now it's time to dim those lights a little. Lower. Because believe it or not, the Pokémon anime had its fair share of episodes that were downright creepy. Yep, the same show, where Pikachu gets stuck in vending machines, also had ghost stories and possessed dolls. And if you say you weren't at least a little weirded out by some of these, I'm going to have to assume you're a ghost yourself. Let's start with the ghost of Maiden's Peak. Oh yes, that episode. You probably remember it because nothing says Saturday. Morning cartoon like a ghost lady haunting a seaside town, cursed to wait forever for her long-lost love. And to make it even better, she was luring young men to their doom. Yep, totally kid-friendly. Team Rocket, as usual, stumbled right into the madness. James gets possessed. His eyes glow like he just downloaded a horror movie. And Jessie levitates like she's auditioning for a paranormal documentary. It was the first time I realized Pokémon might be scarier than the Goosebumps books I was secretly reading under the covers. Then there's the infamous Sabrina's Dollhouse episode. Now, Sabrina was already unsettling with her cold stare and psychic abilities. But when she started turning people into dolls, yeah, that's when it officially got out of hand. Ash and his friends shrunk down, trapped inside a toy room with lifeless dolls staring back at them. And Sabrina just sitting there, smiling like a kid at a birthday party. Except the party guests were tiny, terrified humans. I remember thinking, if one of those dolls blinks, I'm done. I'm out. No other gym battle in the series made you question whether you'd make it out with your soul still attached. And of course, we can't forget Lavender Town. Now, if you played the original Pokémon games, you already know Lavender Town had that weird, unsettling music that gave off something's definitely haunted here vibes. The anime didn't hold back either. Ash and the gang wander through a misty, abandoned tower filled with ghastly Haunter and Gengar pulling ghostly pranks. At one point, they even trick Ash into thinking he's dead. Yep, dead. I'm still not sure how this episode made it past the censors, because nothing says bedtime story like watching your favorite character's soul casually float out of his body. And you know what's wild. There's an episode with a Banette, a doll Pokémon that comes back to get revenge after being thrown away. Think Toy Story, but with serious grudges. It lurks around in the shadows, angry and plotting like the world's creepiest stuffed animal. As a kid, I started side-eyeing my own toys after that. If my old Digimon plush even twitched, it was getting launched straight out the window. And here's one more that quietly messed us up. Abra and the Psychic Showdown. Remember this one? Ash faces off against Sabrina, who basically flexes her psychic powers by destroying his hopes, dreams, and dignity in about 10 seconds. No Pikachu zap could save him here. At one point, the advice Ash gets is literally, go catch a ghost. Like that's a normal plan for a child in an alternate dimension with a $10 backpack and no parental supervision. Looking back, it's honestly impressive how Pokémon casually sprinkled horror movie plots into an otherwise cheerful show about friendship and battling. Somehow, we all survived it. Character-building stuff. Or maybe unresolved childhood trauma juries. Still out. All right, sleepy squad time to lighten the mood. Coming up next, we're diving headfirst into the ridiculous, hilarious world of Team Rocket's funniest, weirdest disguises and fails. And trust me, some of these outfits would have gotten James on the cover of every fashion magazine in Kanto. Blankets up, snacks within reach. This next one's going to be good. All right, sleepyheads, I hope your lights are dim and your blankets tucked in tight, because we're far from done with the weird side of Pokémon. It turns out our beloved anime was a little more ghost story than we realized. You know, the kind of episodes you watched as a kid without realizing you'd be thinking about them decades later while trying to fall asleep at 2 a.m. Let's get back to Lavender Town, because honestly, this place deserves a little extra attention. If you only played the games, you remember that unsettling music that sounded like something a haunted music box would play. But in the anime, it wasn't any less creepy. The town was always shrouded in this gloomy mist, and Ash and the gang basically stumbled into a haunted house, disguised as a Pokémon tower. They met ghastly Haunter and Gengar, but instead of the usual battles, these ghost Pokémon just toyed with them. They played jokes, pulled pranks, and at one point literally separated Ash's spirit from his body. As a kid, it was funny in a ha-ha way. Is Ash actually dead kind of way? I remember sitting there like, is anyone else seeing this? Is this allowed? Meanwhile, Pikachu's just poking his lifeless trainer like it's another day at the office. And let's not forget the episode with Banette, the vengeful doll Pokémon. Now, Banette's whole lore is that it was once an abandoned doll, so filled with hatred it came to life. You know, normal children's show stuff. In the episode, Banette sneaks around, so looking for the person who threw it away. It hides in closets, behind curtains, basically behaving like the Pokémon version of that creepy doll your cousin swore blinked at him once. And of course, it wouldn't be Pokémon without Team Rocket getting caught up in the chaos. Honestly, half the time, those three were just trying to steal a Pikachu, and instead ended up dealing with ghosts, curses, and occasionally getting bodies snatched. Occupational hazard, I guess. Then there was Abra and the Psychic Showdown. This one deserves extra points for weirdness because it featured Sabrina. Hands down, the creepiest gym leader in the series. Ash shows up ready to win a badge and instead ends up trapped in a psychic's personal horror movie. Sabrina didn't just battle trainers. She humiliated them, turned them into dolls, trapped them in creepy dream worlds. At one point, the gang's best plan of action was literally to find a ghost, to fight her because conventional strategy wasn't going to cut it. And the weirdest part, Sabrina's only company was a tiny, doll-sized version of herself. Nobody explained it. Nobody questioned it. Classic Pokémon leave the terrifying details hanging and move on. There was also an episode called A Ship Full of Shivers, where a sunken ship full of ghost Pokémon traps our heroes underwater. You had Gengar and Ghastly hiding in the shadows, flickering lights, eerie silence, and random objects moving by themselves. And, of course, Ash still insisted on wandering around like some ghost hunter with plot armor. Misty was all of us that episode, by the way. She just wanted to leave. Smart girl. And here's one last eerie gem, the Tower of Terror. Despite the name, it was actually one of the funnier ghost episodes, but it didn't hold back on the spooky atmosphere. Fog everywhere, creaky staircases, portraits with moving eyes, and ghost Pokémon, pulling the kind of pranks that would give anyone a minor heart attack. Ash literally dies again for like the second time in the series. Haunter and Gengar pull his soul out of his body for a laugh. And what does Ash do? Laughs along with them, as if being temporarily deceased was a totally reasonable thing to happen before dinner. The thing about these episodes is that as kids, we just kind of accepted it. Like, yeah, sure, people get turned into dolls. Ghost, Pokémon toy with your immortal soul. No big deal. But looking back now, these were some wild storylines, and it's part of what made Pokémon so special. It wasn't afraid to get weird, a little dark, and a little mysterious. And honestly, it built character. If you made it through these episodes without sleeping with the lights on, you probably grew up braver than the rest of us. All right, Sleepy Legends, time to shake off those chills, because up next, we're going from eerie to downright hilarious. That's right. We're diving into Team Rocket's funniest, weirdest disguises and fails. And let me tell you, if you've forgotten about James in a wedding dress or Meowth pretending to be a doctor, you're in for a treat. Blankets up, maybe grab a snack, and I'll meet you there. Since we're on a roll with the spooky stuff, let's not stop just yet. Because believe it or not, there were even more episodes that quietly snuck in horror movie plots while we were too busy arguing over whether Charizard was better than Blastoise. And honestly, some of these episodes were so strange, I still wonder if the writers were having a little too much fun in those early seasons. One classic weird moment came from an episode called Haunter versus Kadabra. This was part of that same Sabrina arc, but it deserves its own spotlight. Ash teams up with Haunter to face Sabrina because, as we all know, when your gym battle strategy falls apart, the logical thing to do is befriend a mischievous ghost. And what does Haunter do? Does it battle? Nope. It floats around, making faces, plays harmless pranks, and ultimately wins the match by making Sabrina laugh. That's right. All it took to break the psychic terror's grip on reality was a good ghost joke. If only the rest of us could resolve our emotional damage with a floating poltergeist doing slapstick comedy. And then there was Pikachu Revolts. Now this one was a weird combo of eerie and hilarious. A sinister character named Butch, and Cassidy uses a device called Drowsy Hypno Wave, because apparently mind control technology was just lying around him. Kanto and turns all the local Pokémon against their trainers, including Pikachu. And let me tell you, nothing is more unsettling than a rage-fueled Pikachu glaring at Ash like it's about to drop a thunderbolt right on his head. I remember watching it thinking, oh, no, this is how Ash dies. Thankfully, Team Rocket, of all people, ends up helping save the day, proving once again that they're low-key the heroes of this entire series. Now, how could we forget A Scare in the Air, a classic episode where our favorite trio, Ash, Misty, and Brock, hop aboard a blimp owned by Team Rocket's old organization. And what's on board? Oh, nothing special, just a bunch of half-broken machines, creepy hallways, and ghost Pokémon lurking in the shadows. The blimp itself is so old and unstable it practically creaks with every step, and half the staff are either missing or were probably ghost Pokémon in disguise. The whole thing felt like an episode of Pokémon Paranormal, Blimp Edition. And if you really want to dive deep into bizarre territory, there's Fear Factor Phony. This was a later episode, but it deserves a mention for pure weirdness alone. In this one, ghost Pokémon start pulling pranks on humans in a forest because they think it's funny. Lights flicker, shadows move, eerie laughter fills the air. And because this is Pokémon, nobody calls the police or a ghost hunting squad. They just let Ash handle it, like always. At one point, even Brock gets spooked. And if Brock's rattled, you know, things are getting serious. But perhaps one of the most unsettling moments in the entire franchise comes from who gets to keep Togepi. Now, I know what you're thinking, Togepi, that cute little egg with legs. What's creepy about that? Well, it wasn't Togepi, it was Meowth. There's a scene where Meowth has a full-on hallucination about raising Togepi as his own child. He's imagining himself as a proud parent taking Togepi for walks, dressing it up, feeding it. And I swear something about the animation and Meow's slightly too intense excitement gave off Major Unhinged Uncle babysitting the heir to the family fortune bees. It was both hilarious and slightly alarming. Classic Meowth. These odd, eerie, and downright unsettling episodes are part of what made early Pokémon such a strange and wonderful ride. One minute you're watching a friendly battle in Viridian Forest, and the next you're in a haunted tower with a gang of ghost Pokémon, pulling pranks and possessing Team Rocket, and we just accepted it. No questions asked. If it happened in the Pokémon world, it made sense. And that's what I love about revisiting these moments now. They remind us that even the brightest, happiest shows sometimes lean into the strange, the mysterious, and the slightly dark. It made the adventure feel bigger, like the world wasn't always safe, but it was always interesting. It's probably why we're still talking about it decades later as we drift off to sleep. All right, sleepy legends, the fog is clearing. The ghost Pokémon have gone back to their haunted towers, and it's time to swap Erie. Chills for belly laughs. Coming up next, we're celebrating the one constant in the Pokémon universe, Team Rocket being absolute disasters. Their disguises, their plans, and their wildly unnecessary musical numbers. You're not ready for the stuff they pulled off, and honestly, neither were we. Get comfy, grab a snack, and I'll meet you there. But Lavender Town wasn't the only eerie setting the anime served us when we least expected it. There's another episode that still makes longtime fans shiver a little when it comes up in conversation, and that's Pikachu's Goodbye. Now, on the surface, this one isn't horror in the traditional sense. No ghosts, no glitches, no ancient curses, but emotional horror. Oh, it delivers. And there's a quiet kind of sadness here that when you're a kid watching late at night, hits with the same eerie weight as any ghost story. In this episode, Ash comes across a group of wild Pikachu, free, happy, and living in harmony away from the world of trainers and Pokeballs. And for a moment, Ash considers doing the unthinkable, letting Pikachu go. The episode slows down. The colors mute. The music gets soft and mournful. And for a kid watching in bed, it feels like the world's ending. The scariest part, it forces you as a viewer to ask, what if sometimes leaving is the right thing to do? What if you're holding on to something you love when it deserves to be free? That existential dread delivered through a children's cartoon is far heavier than most ghost stories. And let's not forget Bye Bye Butterfree, another heartbreaker disguised as a simple adventure. In this one, Ash says goodbye to his beloved Butterfree so it can be with its mate. But before that, there's a scene where dozens of Butterfree gather in the sky for their migration. The sun sets, casting eerie purples and oranges over the ocean. And for a moment, it feels like an ancient ritual you've accidentally stumbled upon. There's something deeply primal about watching those silent Pokémon float away, leaving the land behind, guided only by instinct. It taps into the same melancholy as old myths creatures that move between worlds, vanishing into the unknown while the living stay behind. And then we have the legend of Dratini. Now, this episode was famously banned outside Japan for reasons tied to a hunter character using a firearm. But what most people don't realize is that the banned episode itself is strangely somber and atmospheric. Set in the Safari Zone, Ash and friends learn about the rare and elusive Dratini, a serpentine Pokémon said to bring good fortune, yet one rarely seen by humans. There's a sense of ancient reverence in how the characters speak about it. The locals treat Dratini almost like a mythic guardian of nature. And when it finally appears, the scene is oddly quiet. No fanfare, no battle, just a creature too old and too sacred for the world around it. The episode is filled with sweeping shots of misty rivers and tall grass swaying under a twilight sky. It feels more like a nature documentary about a creature mankind was never meant to touch. And knowing it was essentially wiped from Western broadcast ads to its ghost story status, an episode lost to time, whispered about but rarely seen. And one more for you, a ship full of shivers. An eerie ghost ship episode set on a stormy sea. Ash and friends find themselves trapped aboard a derelict ship haunted by ghost Pokémon. Flickering candlelight, long-forgotten dining halls, portraits whose eyes seem to follow you. It's classic haunted house storytelling, but on the ocean. The episode uses silence masterfully. The creak of wood, the distant howl of wind, the occasional soft splash against the hull. And when the ghost Pokémon finally reveal themselves, it's not in a big jump-scare moment, but through subtle, lingering moments where shadows move just a little too deliberately. Even now, I get a chill remembering the first time I watched it on a small TV, sound low so I wouldn't wake anyone else in the house. That eerie sense of being alone, lost at sea in a world where even the dead can still play tricks. And it wouldn't be a proper dive into Pokemon's eeriest episodes if we didn't mention one of the absolute strangest, Tentacruel. Now, this episode starts off innocently enough. Ash and the gang arrive in a city by the sea where developers are trying to build a resort on the waterfront. Classic filler material, right? But what follows takes a surprisingly dark turn for a Saturday morning cartoon. The Tentacruel population, angered by the destruction of their natural habitat, begin attacking the city. And not just with little splashes or harmless scares. No, this is full-on Godzilla mode. At one point, a colossal Tentacruel, larger than skyscrapers, rises from the ocean depths and starts leveling buildings. The imagery is eerily apocalyptic for a kid's show, shattered windows, panicked citizens running through flooded streets, and a massive tentacled creature looming through the storm-darkened skies. And for a moment, it's not about battling Pokémon for fun anymore. It's about survival. The episode briefly flirts with ecological horror, a subtle warning about nature striking back when pushed too far. Even Misty, usually cheerful and tough, looks genuinely terrified as Tentacruel's eye glows menacingly above the city. What makes this episode so haunting isn't just the imagery, though. It's how it forces you to see Pokémon not as loyal partners or cute collectibles, but as forces of nature. Unpredictable, ancient, and very capable of reminding humans of their place. Then there's the Tower of Terror. No, not the Lavender Town one we mentioned earlier, but its own standalone episode, title from the original Kanto saga. In this one, Ash seeks out ghost Pokémon to help defeat Sabrina. But unlike the later episodes, this one leans heavily into classic haunted house tropes. The abandoned Pokémon tower creaks in the wind. Ash and Pikachu find themselves falling through trapdoors, chased by floating chandeliers, and stalked by invisible presences. The ghosts, Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar aren't malicious, but they're unpredictable and far too powerful for Ash to handle. There's a particularly surreal scene where Ash and Pikachu's spirits literally leave their bodies. They float around the room, ghostly versions of themselves, giggling and weightless. And while it's played with a bit of humor, it still plants this weird existential thought. What happens to a trainer's bond with their Pokémon when both of them die? For a show that so often keeps things light and safe, moments like these hit surprisingly deep. It's one thing to see a ghost story, it's another to watch your favorite characters literally become ghosts. And before we drift toward the end of this segment, there's Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time Darkness. Lesser-known anime special based on the Mystery Dungeon games. This one is pure atmospheric eeriness. You play, or in this case, watch, as a human transformed into a Pokémon, waking up in a strange world with no memory of your past life. Even in the animated special, there's a dreamlike, unsettling quality to this concept. The idea that you might lose your identity, your voice, even your species, and be forced to navigate an alien world where no one remembers you. The dungeons are dark and misty. Creeping vines and glowing stones light the path, and in every corner lurk Pokémon whose intentions you can't quite read. It taps into that childhood fear of waking up somewhere unfamiliar. And worse yet, forgetting who you were before you got there. These episodes scattered throughout the series like half-buried memories are why Pokémon, despite its sunny surface, still holds this quietly eerie undertone for so many of us. Because it isn't always the battles you remember, or the gym badges, or Team Rocket's antics. It's those odd, out-of-place moments where something felt different, like the air got colder, like the world slipped out of its cheerful cartoon skin for a second, and let you peek at something older, stranger, and far more mysterious underneath. All right, sleepy legends, we've cried over Butterfree, we've been spooked by ghost Pokémon in haunted towers, and now it's time to laugh. Because if there's one thing the Pokémon anime absolutely excelled at, it was giving us the most wonderfully unhinged, over-the-top, completely unnecessary antics from the one and only Team Rocket. Honestly, I don't care how cool your favorite villain team is. No one, and I mean no one, was as consistently ridiculous as Jesse, James, and Meowth. These three could turn a simple Pikachu snatch and grab into a Broadway performance, a historical reenactment, or a full-blown soap opera with costumes, lighting, and voiceover monologues. Half the time, you weren't even rooting for Ash and Pikachu to win. You were just waiting to see what bizarre scheme Team Rocket was going to pull out of their hat nay. And speaking of hats, let's talk about the disguises. If you ever thought Clark Kent got away with just wearing glasses, wait until you remember how often Ash and friends were fooled by Team Rocket in full costume. And it wasn't even good disguises. Half the time, it was literally a pair of fake mustaches and a new outfit, and everyone was like, seems legit. One of my personal favorites, James in a wedding dress. Yep, it happened. Multiple times, actually. There was one episode where James shows up in full bridal attire, veil, gloves, bouquet, the whole 9 yards. And not only does no one question it, but he actually manages to pull it off, like disturbingly well. I remember sitting there thinking, you know what? Good for you, James. Work ahead. And it wasn't a one-time gag either. James had a whole portfolio of characters. Nurse, princess, old lady, chef, ghost, cow, you name it. And somehow, every single time, Ash and the gang would fall for it. Jessie, of course, wasn't innocent either. She once disguised herself as a grandma, a police officer, a teacher, and my personal favorite, an announcer for a fake Pokémon contest that she 100% made up on the spot. The sheer confidence these two had while lying through their teeth was honestly inspiring. And Meowth? Don't even get me started. That little furball once dressed up as a doctor, a fortune teller, a baby, and on more than one occasion, a Pikachu. A full-on Pikachu suit. And the best part is that he never even bothered to hide his face. It was just Meowth's face in a onesie. And yet somehow, someone, somewhere would still be like, wait, is that a wild Pikachu? But their disguises weren't even the weirdest part. It was how far they'd go to make the plan work. One episode, they literally built a giant mechanical mecha in the shape of a Clefairy spaceship. Another time, they constructed a full-size functioning carnival just to lure in Ash's Pikachu, a carnival, with rides, food stalls, games. All for one tiny electric mouse. I don't know what Team Rocket's actual budget was, but either they had some shady sponsors, or Meowth was secretly embezzling from the Pokémon League. And their plans? Absolute masterpieces of chaos. There's the time they tried to steal Pikachu by dressing as a giant Magikarp, full costume, hopping through the forest. I can't even picture how they thought that one would end. Was the plan to just scoop Pikachu up in the fish mouth and bounce away? Honestly, I respect the creativity. And then there was the episode where they pretended to be fortune tellers, convincing Ash and the others that their future depended on handing over their Pokémon. The ridiculous part, it worked. For like 5 solid minutes. I'm convinced Ash would have handed over his backpack, hat, and firstborn child if Jessie promised him a rare candy. And let's not forget their signature move, the Team Rocket motto. You know the one. Prepare for trouble, and make it double, and so on. I swear, no matter what urgent disaster was happening, these three would always pause to recite the full speech with synchronized poses, dramatic lighting, and occasionally a random musical number. One time the motto was sung opera style, and another time they did it while surfing on a giant inflatable Gyarados. You know, casual stuff. The best part, Ash and his friends just let them. No one ever interrupted. No one ever said, hey, maybe we should grab Pikachu, while they're distracted doing their little poem thing. Nope. Everyone respectfully waited for them to finish their performance before moving on with the inevitable battle. It's honestly the most polite recurring battle etiquette I've ever seen in a cartoon. All right, and that's just scratching the surface, sleepyheads. Because we haven't even gotten to the time James bought a solid gold, Magikarp, or when they accidentally won a beauty contest, or when Meowth ran for mayor of a small island town. Oh yes, it gets weirder. Much weirder. So fluff those pillows, grab a sip of water, and stay right where you are. Because we're just getting warmed up with the glorious disasters that were Team Rocket's finest moments. I'll meet you on the next stretch of this wonderfully ridiculous road trip down memory lane. Now, where were we? Oh, right, Team Rocket and their gold-plated Magikarp scam. This one deserves a standing ovation. Picture this. James, forever a sucker for anything flashy and unnecessary, gets talked into buying a so-called rare investment-grade Magikarp from a shifty salesman. And not just any Magikarp, a solid gold Magikarp. Spoiler alert. It wasn't gold, it wasn't rare, it wasn't even mildly useful. It was, in fact, the single most useless fish in existence. And James was so proud of it. Carried it around, like it was an antique vase. Meanwhile, Jessie and Meowth were just staring at him like, "Bro, you've been conned." Of course, in true Pokémon fashion, things escalated. The Magikarp later evolved into a Gyarados and tried to drown them all. Which honestly is the most fitting end to a Magikarp scam storyline I could imagine. I swear, if there's one thing Team Rocket was good at, it was creating problems entirely of their own making. And let's not forget about the time they accidentally won a beauty contest. No lie. Jessie enters a competition under disguise because, of course, and thanks to a series of unfortunate, absolutely ridiculous events, actually wins. Now you'd think this would be a moment of triumph for Team Rocket, a rare W in a long, long list of L's. But no. In classic Jessie style, she lets the win go straight to her head, starts threatening the judges, and inevitably gets herself and the trophy blasted off again within minutes. I guess you could say their motto should have been prepare for trouble and make it self-sabotaging. And speaking of Jessie and James doing way too much for way too little, remember the episode where Meowth ran for mayor of a small island town? I kid you not. Through a series of wildly improbable events, because naturally Meowth somehow becomes a political candidate. And not only that, the townspeople actually consider voting for him. There's a full-on campaign, posters, speeches. It's like Pokémon meets House of Cards, only with fewer betrayals and more fur. And you better believe Team Rocket tried to rig the whole thing just to steal Pikachu, because apparently nothing says elaborate heist like a fraudulent local election. And that's what made Team Rocket so brilliant. They didn't just stick to stealing. No, these three were entrepreneurs of nonsense. One day it's a mechanical Arbok suit. The next, it's a gourmet Pikachu-themed restaurant designed to lure in electric types. They had more job titles than most people rack up on their resumes in a lifetime. Circus performers, talent agents, news anchors, food vendors, ghost hunters. And somehow, every single time, they pulled it off, just convincingly enough to fool a handful of people before getting exposed by their own sheer incompetence. You've got to respect the commitment, though. There's an episode where they literally built a giant inflatable Gyarados submarine, a full-functioning, underwater-operating inflatable Gyarados. It was both the dumbest and greatest idea they ever had. And yet, as always, Ash and Pikachu would see through the plan at the last possible moment. And boom cue the classic looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again. Which brings me to one of my absolute favorite running jokes. How no matter what disaster befell them, they'd always manage to escape relatively unharmed, floating away into the stratosphere like it was just another Tuesday. I mean, who survives getting struck by thunderbolt, smashed by a falling boulder, exploded by their own robot machine, and still manages to deliver a witty one-liner on the way out? These three were indestructible. If the world ever ends, it'll be Team Rocket and a couple of cockroaches left behind, arguing about how to steal the last Pikachu on Earth. And what makes all of this so lovable is how, despite being the villains, they were never truly evil. They never hurt anyone on purpose. Their grand schemes were always more silly than sinister. And deep down, you always kinda wanted them to win. Just once. Just one successful Pikachu heist. One prize ribbon. One job they didn't get fired from. But alas, fate, physics, and Ash, Ketchum's suspiciously good luck, made sure they never did. And that's why, decades later, Team Rocket still holds up as one of the most entertaining parts of the Pokémon universe. The disguises, the plans, the complete inability to ever learn a lesson. It was predictable chaos, and we loved every second of it. All right, Sleepy Squad, we're not done yet. Because, believe it or not, there are still more beautifully ridiculous Team Rocket moments to relive. So, fluff those pillows, top off your water bottle, and settle back in. We're about to talk about the weirdest, most over-the-top gadgets and inventions Team Rocket ever built. Trust me, it gets wilder. All right, Sleepy Squad, hope you're still cozy, because now we're diving into what might just be my favorite part of Team Rocket's legendary career in ridiculousness. They're absolutely bonkers gadgets, machines, and inventions. Let's be honest, while other villains in cartoons were busy plotting world domination or piloting ominous helicopters, Team Rocket was out here building giant robot Pokémon with the kind of budget that makes you question everything. Who was funding them? How were they affording all this tech? And more importantly, who was designing these things? Because sometimes it felt like a 10-year-old with a box of crayons and an unlimited credit card was in charge. Take, for example, the Mecha Mewtwo. Yep, they made a giant robotic version of one of the most powerful Pokémon in existence. You'd think maybe they'd test it out, work out the kinks, or make sure it could actually capture a small electric mouse. But no, it malfunctions almost immediately because, of course, it does, and ends up backfiring spectacularly. I'm convinced half of Team Rocket's failures weren't because of Ash, but because their gadgets were held together with duct tape, hope, and probably leftover Magikarp scale. And speaking of fish, one of their greatest, and by greatest, I mean absolutely idiotic inventions, was the Magikarp submarine. Yes, a fully functional submarine shaped like a Magikarp, because if you're going to commit grand theft Pokémon, you might as well do it with style. It even had moving fins and a mouth that opened to swallow up unsuspecting trainers. Honestly, the audacity of it is what makes it genius. Then there was the Poke Pod, a giant spherical contraption designed to trap Pokémon using mechanical arms. But did it work? Absolutely not. Like clockwork, Pikachu would blast it apart with a thunderbolt in under 30 seconds, leaving Jessie, James, and Meowth smudged with soot and soaring through the sky, every single time. And yet credit where it's due. They never stopped trying. No matter how spectacular the explosion, how humiliating the failure, they were always back the next day with something bigger, dumber, and probably more expensive. One of the most hilariously pointless machines they ever built was a giant rubber stamp robot. What was it for, you ask? No one knows. Its one job was to stamp things with the Team Rocket logo. That's it. No catching, no battling, just branding. Because even in failure, these three understood the importance of a personal logo. Move over, Nike. And let's not forget the Pikachu capture cannon, a massive cannon designed solely to fire a net at Pikachu. Now you might think, hey, maybe this one could work. But naturally, it was so big and clunky, it either missed entirely, shot the net backwards, or just exploded on the launch pad. I think my favorite part was how every time one of these machines inevitably malfunctioned, Jessie would scream, James would panic, and Meowth would deliver a one-liner like, why do we even have this thing? They even had a remote-controlled suit of armor once, controlled by Meowth, like a high-stakes video game. And as you'd expect, it was a complete disaster. The armor malfunctioned, trapping James inside while Jessie tried desperately to pilot it with instructions. Like, turn left. No, your other left. It lasted 5 minutes before Pikachu fried the circuitry and sent them sky high once again. And here's one for the history books, the Psyduck Mecha. Yes, an actual giant robotic Psyduck, because reasons. It waddled, it quacked, and it had zero battle ability, but they built it anyway. Honestly, at this point, I'm convinced they just liked building giant robots for the chaos of it. But that's what made Team Rocket so brilliant. Their inventions were always so over the top, so unnecessarily complicated. You couldn't help but admire the dedication. They could have just thrown a pokeball like normal villains, but no, these three needed theatrics. They needed fireworks, gadgets, disguises, and a plan that was doomed to fail in the most spectacular way possible. And somehow, no matter how many times their machines blew up in their faces, they always had a brand new contraption ready for the next episode. It's one of those beautifully absurd things that made the Pokémon anime so charming. The predictability of Team Rocket's antics became a comfort. You knew they'd show up. You knew they'd build something ridiculous. You knew it would fail. And you knew you'd laugh when it happened. All right, Sleepy Squad, we're still not done with these lovable disasters. Because next, we're diving into some of the weirdest, most oddly heartfelt moments Team Rocket ever had. Yep, believe it or not. Behind the disguises, robots, and endless blasting, off. There were actually a few scenes that low-key made us tear up. Get those tissues back within arm's reach. I'll meet you there. All right, sleepyheads, we've laughed at their disguises, marveled at their ridiculous gadgets, and watched them get blasted into. the stratosphere, more times than we can count. But now, let's slow it down for a second. Because, believe it or not, beneath all the slapstick comedy, elaborate mecha psyducks, and opera-style motto recitals, Team Rocket actually had a heart. I know it sounds wild. These three clowns who spent their careers chasing after one stubborn electric mouse had actual emotional depth. Yep. And if you were paying attention, you'll remember a handful of episodes where they weren't just cartoonish. Villains, but surprisingly relatable. Sometimes even downright sad characters. And honestly, those moments hit harder than any Thunderbolt ever did. Let's start with one of the most famous scenes, Meowth's backstory. If you only remember one thing about Meowth, besides his wisecracks and dodgy disguises, it's probably this episode. Turns out our sarcastic little feline wasn't always a Team Rocket agent. In one of the show's most unexpectedly emotional flashbacks, we find out that Meowth was once a lonely street Pokémon, abandoned and starving with no one to care for him. And it gets even sadder. Meowth falls in love with a classy female Meowth named Meowsy. But here's the heartbreak she rejects. Him because he's poor and wild. Meowth, being the stubborn little legend he is, teaches himself to walk on two legs and speak human language just to impress her. I mean, let that sink in. This dude literally defied nature and the laws of the Pokémon universe for love. And after all that, Meowsy still turns him down. Brutal. As a kid, I remember sitting there, eyes wide, thinking, wait, am I about to cry over a cartoon cat? And yep, I did. Still do, if I'm honest. It was one of the first times Pokémon taught us that even the characters we laughed at had their own stories, their own scars, and their own reasons for being the way they were. And Meowth's story wasn't the only one. James had his share of heartbreak, too. Behind the powdered wigs, princess disguises, and overdramatic monologues, James was kind of a softie. One episode reveals that James came from a wealthy, oppressive family who wanted to force him into a loveless marriage with a controlling fiancée named Jessie Bell, who, by the way, was basically Jessie's evil clone with a southern accent. James, desperate to escape his stuffy mansion life, literally ran away from home and joined a gang of thieves. And honestly, that was the best decision he ever made. Because as ridiculous as it sounds, Team Rocket became his family. Jessie and Meowth might have been chaos incarnate, but they accepted him. For all his drama, fear of rejection, and tendency to buy gold Magikarp, they had his back. And when James occasionally showed genuine concern for his friends, like the time he refused to leave Jessie behind on a sinking ship, or when he nearly cried after Meowth was injured, you realized this wasn't just a villain team. It was a weird, dysfunctional little family. And speaking of Jessie, Jessie, for all her ego and sass, there were moments where she peeled back the layers and showed you the kid she used to be. There's a moment in the anime where she talks about growing up poor, eating snow because she couldn't afford food, and dreaming of becoming a nurse Joy. And while it was played off with humor, because let's face it, a Jessie Nurse Joy would be a medical emergency in itself, you could feel the weight behind those words. Jessie wasn't just chasing Pikachu for a paycheck. She was chasing recognition, validation, and a life better than the one she had. And sometimes, when the disguises came off and the giant robots broke down, you caught little glimpses of that. Like when she'd quietly cheer for James during his silly contests, or when she'd pretend not to care about Meowth but patch him up anyway. And that's what made Team Rocket so different from your typical cartoon villains. They weren't evil for the sake of it. They weren't plotting world domination or trying to plunge the planet into darkness. Honestly, they were just three broken, slightly ridiculous souls trying to find a place where they belonged. And if that place happened to be inside a giant Wobbuffet-shaped hot air balloon, so be it. All right, Sleepy Squad, we've only scratched the surface of these surprisingly emotional moments. There's more where that came from. So pull those blankets a little higher, because up next, we'll relive a few times Team Rocket actually risked it all for each other. And yes, some of them will hit you right in the childhood. I'll meet you there. All right, sleepyheads, fluff those pillows, because we're far from done tugging at your nostalgic heartstrings. As much as Team Rocket made us laugh with their outrageous schemes and fashion crimes, there were those moments, rare, precious little blips in the chaos where they'd risk it all for each other. And every single time, it reminded us why we loved them so much in the first place. One of the best examples, that shipwreck episode. You remember the one? The gang's trapped on a sinking ship, danger everywhere. And for once, stealing Pikachu wasn't the priority. Jesse and James, instead of their usual every crook for themselves, attitude, stick together. There's this genuinely sweet scene where James refuses to leave Jesse behind, even when the ship's flooding fast. They both grab onto Meowth and float away on a piece of debris like a couple of cartoon castaways. It's chaotic, it's ridiculous. It's also kind of adorable. And then there's the episode where Meowth gets injured protecting Pikachu. I know Wild, right? The one Pokémon he spent years chasing, trying to capture, and sometimes low-key electrocute. And when push came to shove, he shielded Pikachu from harm. There's a quiet little moment where Jesse and James actually look worried-like, genuinely worried about their tiny, snarky teammate. No jokes, no blasting off gags, just pure concern. And you'll realize that behind all their bluster, these three would take a hit for each other any day. Another underrated emotional moment comes from James and his beloved Growlithe. Growly. I swear this one still gets me. We learned that before running away from his overbearing and wealthy family, James had one true friend, a loyal Growlithe who loved him unconditionally. In an episode where James returns home, there's a heartbreaking reunion where Growly recognizes him instantly, despite years apart. It's one of those scenes that sneaks up on you. One minute you're laughing at Meowth, pretending to be a butler, and the next you're wiping away a tear, wondering why this show is emotionally ambushing you at midnight. And Jessie? She's got her moments, too. One of the most surprising comes in a later season during a Pokémon contest. Now, normally, Jessie enters these things under a fake name, cheats outrageously, and inevitably loses in a hilarious fashion. But in this one contest, she competes fair and square. And when she actually wins for real, no scams involved, she's so overcome with emotion that she starts crying. It's this tiny, beautiful moment of validation for a character who spent her whole life as the underdog. And yeah, 2 episodes later, she's back to swiping Pikachu with a fishing net. But for that brief scene, you're proud of her. And who could forget the times they sacrificed their prize gadgets or big opportunities for each other? Like when they finally got their hands on a powerful Pokémon or a treasure chest full of loot, only for one of them to get trapped or caught. And without hesitation, they ditched the prize to save their teammate. For a trio of so-called villains, they had better loyalty than half the heroes you see in other shows. What made these moments hit so hard wasn't just the surprise of seeing bad guys care about each other. It was how effortless and genuine it felt. Team Rocket's bond wasn't forced. It wasn't based on strategy or convenience. It was messy, chaotic, and built on years of shared failures, impossible schemes, and mutual weirdness. And when things got tough, they didn't just stick together. They chose each other every time. And let's be honest, didn't a little part of you deep down always kind of root for them? Not to steal Pikachu, of course. That would have caused the whole universe to collapse, probably. But to win something, to have a good day, to not get electrocuted or humiliated for once. Because they weren't really villains. They were just people, well, people and one talking cat trying to survive in a world where they were constantly one step behind. All right, cozy crew, we're still not done exploring the soft, secretly sentimental side of Team Rocket. In the next stretch, we're going to relive some of the funniest, most awkward crushes, friendships, and downright bizarre relationships this trio ever got caught up in. And trust me, it gets weird. You'll want to stick around for this one. I'll meet you there. All right, my sleepy squad, snuggle down, because this next bit is one of my favorites. We've covered Team Rocket's friendship, their loyalty, and those surprisingly touching moments that sneak up and tug at your heart when you least expect it. But now, let's talk about something even juicier. Their wonderfully awkward crushes, oddball friendships, and completely bizarre little flings with side characters and Pokémon. Because if there's one thing this trio knew how to do besides building malfunctioning robots, it was getting themselves tangled up in some of the weirdest relationship dynamics in cartoon history. Let's start with James. Sweet, dramatic, overly sensitive James. This man had more odd crushes and uncomfortable run-ins than anyone in the Pokémon universe. You remember Jessie Bell, right? James's high society Southern Belle fiancée who looked and acted like a Jessie clone if you cranked up the possessive energy to 11. She chased poor James around with a whip and a demand for marriage. And every time she showed up, it felt like we'd accidentally wandered into a gothic soap opera. James's reactions were priceless, diving out of windows, hiding behind potted plants, even faking his own demise once. I swear, half the time I was rooting harder for him to escape her than I was for Ash to win a badge. Then there's Meowth and his whole unrequited love arc with Meowsy. Yep, still hurts to think about. Meowth wasn't just crushing. He was smitten. And despite the heartbreak, he never fully let it go. Every now and then, you'd catch him sighing about love, lost or getting a little too invested in someone else's romantic drama. It was adorable and kind of sad in equal measure. One of those classic he deserves better moments. And honestly, even Jessie had her fair share of chaotic flirtations. Remember that episode where she nearly runs off with a random muscular Pokémon performer at a carnival? Or the one where she gets way too emotionally attached to a mime Pokémon because it gave her a flower? Jessie had a soft spot for grand gestures and anyone who could match her flair for the dramatic, which in the Pokémon world meant a lot of oddball encounters. But the weirdest, most awkwardly endearing relationship dynamic of all, Jessie and James themselves. Now, whether you shipped them romantically or just as ride-or-die besties, there's no denying those two were each other's person. Sure, they argued constantly about everything from battle plans to whose turn it was to cook dinner in the Meowth balloon. But at the end of the day, if someone messed with one of them, the other would show up swinging a frying pan, piloting a malfunctioning robot, or delivering an overdramatic speech about loyalty and friendship. And let's not forget the odd, unexpected friendships they occasionally formed outside their little trio, like the time James bonded with a Cacnea who loved him so aggressively it practically tackled him to the ground in every episode. Or Jessie adopting a Wobbuffet who popped out at the worst possible moments but somehow became an honorary Team Rocket member. That little blue blob ended up in more disguises than Meowth. There was even a strangely wholesome episode where Team Rocket teams up with Ash and friends to save a group of endangered Pokémon. And for a minute, you kind of wish they'd just stayed friends. Because when they weren't stealing stuff or getting electrocuted, they were surprisingly fun to be around. It was like watching that one group of drama-prone cousins at a family gathering who are constantly fighting. But if an outsider shows up, suddenly they're your fiercest defenders. And that's what made all these awkward crushes and friendships so good. They added a weirdly human, flawed, relatable touch to these characters. Because let's face it, haven't we all had a Meowsy? That one unattainable crush who didn't love us back. Or a Jessie Bell, a James-style panic escape moment. A Wobbuffet who shows up at the worst time, but you kind of love them anyway. Team Rocket wasn't just comic relief. They were a reflection of the messy, funny, slightly embarrassing relationships we all stumble into. All right, sleepyheads, we've got one last stretch left on this warm, fuzzy, nostalgia-filled road trip. Because next up, we're diving into the times Team Rocket unexpectedly helped save the day. Yep, the villains becoming accidental heroes. You'll want to stick around for these because they're some of the best surprises the anime ever gave us. I'll meet you there. Sleepy squad, the blankets are cozy, the lights are low, and your snack crumbs are probably all over your bed by now. No judgment. Because it's time for one of the most delightfully unexpected things the Pokémon anime ever did. Those moments when Team Rocket, yes, the world's most consistently unlucky crooks, accidentally saved the day. I know. On paper, these three couldn't organize a lemonade stand without it collapsing into chaos. But somehow, every once in a while, fate, dumb luck, or sheer stubbornness would put them in the right place at the right time. And when it happened, it was absolute magic. Let's start with a classic, the St. Anne episode. If you were a 90s kid, this one probably lives rent-free in your brain. Everyone, Ash, Misty, Brock, and a boatload of other trainers, ends up trapped on a sinking luxury cruise ship. Now, normally you'd expect Team Rocket to see this as a golden opportunity to swipe some pokeballs and bounce. But instead, they teamed up with Ash and the others to escape. Yep, full-on cooperation. There's this iconic moment where they all grab onto a makeshift raft and paddle for their lives, Meowth included, arguing like siblings stuck on a family road trip. It's pure chaotic energy, and low-key Team Rocket actually saved lives that day. Then there's the time they stopped a rampaging Tentacruel. And no, I'm not making that up. In one of the early episodes, a giant, skyscraper-sized Tentacruel goes on an absolute Godzilla-style rampage through a coastal city. Buildings getting wrecked, boats getting flipped, total disaster. And while Ash and Misty try to save the day, Team Rocket, well, they accidentally help. Jesse and James, in their usual attempt to profit off the chaos, end up distracting the Tentacruel long enough for the good guys to hatch a plan. One poorly timed motto later, Tentacruel smashes their robot, obviously. But the distraction works, and the city gets saved. Completely unintentional heroism. Classic them.
And who could forget the Lugia arc? Man, this one was intense. Ash and the gang are trying to protect a baby Lugia from a ruthless Pokémon poacher named Dr. Number. And of course, Team Rocket gets involved because, you know, shiny legendary baby equals jackpot, right? But somewhere along the way, something wild happens. Jesse, James, and Meowth actually start to care. Not because of some big moral awakening, mind you. It's more like, hey, if anyone's going to snatch that Lugia, it's going to be us, not that guy. But still, when it comes down to it, Team Rocket helps defend the baby Lugia. They fight off the poacher's henchmen, rescue Ash and friends, and yes, even risk getting blasted for the greater good. A full redemption episode by accident. And honestly, that's kind of the magic of these moments. Team Rocket didn't need to be heroic. They didn't set out to be. But when the chips were down, when lives were on the line, when something or someone messed with their turf, their Pokémon, or their weird little found family trio, they stepped up, often grumbling the whole way, but they did it. Another gem, that time with the econs and coughing. This one still makes my heart ache a little. Early in the series, when Jesse and James are forced to release their beloved first Pokémon econs and coughing to protect a group of wild Pokémon from poachers. And you can tell. It hurts them. No jokes, no disguises, no gadgets. Just a quiet, selfless decision. They hug their Pokémon goodbye. Promise to keep the poachers distracted and let them go. I swear, the first time I saw that as a kid, I sat there sniffling into my blanket like, why is this show making me feel things about cartoon criminals? And the thing is, these weren't isolated incidents. The anime sprinkled in these accidental hero moments just often enough to remind us that for all their flaws and failures, Team Rocket had heart. Sure, they'd be back to their old tricks the next episode, chasing Pikachu and getting zapped into the sky. But for one shining moment, they were the good guys. All right, sleepy legends, that's just the start of their accidental heroics. Up next, we'll revisit a few more glorious disasters where Team Rocket, against all odds, ended up saving the day. So fluff that pillow and stay put. The next stories are even better. All right, sleepyheads. If you thought those last heroic accidents were a fluke, buckle up, because Team Rocket's streak of unplanned do-gooding didn't stop there. Nope. Turns out these three were practically serial accidental heroes. And honestly, I live for it. One of the best examples comes from a later season episode involving a haunted Wobbuffet village. Now stick with me here, because if you've forgotten this one, it's an absolute fever dream. There's a remote town where Wobbuffet are considered sacred. Naturally, Team Rocket, being Team Rocket, tried to scam the townsfolk by pretending to have the most divine, most powerful Wobbuffet ever. Spoiler. It's literally just their Wobbuffet doing absolutely nothing as usual. But in classic anime fashion, a bigger, scarier threat shows up an ancient ghost Pokémon wreaking havoc on the town. And while the townspeople panic, guess who steps up? Yep, Jesse, James, Meowth, and that dopey Wobbuffet. They somehow manage to distract the spirit long enough for Ash and Pikachu to set things right. It's a disaster. It makes zero sense, and it's brilliant. Because in that moment, Team Rocket isn't thinking about stealing Pokémon. They're too busy screaming and running, accidentally saving an entire village in the process. And then there's the dry floon episode. Remember those adorable floating balloon Pokémon? Well, turns out they're not so harmless when a storm hits. A group of young kids nearly gets swept away by a cluster of rogue dry floon during a bad windstorm. And while Ash and the gang scramble to rescue them, Team Rocket, who had been plotting their latest Pikachu heist, spot the danger and, without hesitation, jump in to help. There's this split-second moment where James grabs one of the kids by the hand. Meowth grabs another, and Jessie's barking orders, like she's running a rescue squad instead of a petty crime ring.
It's weirdly wholesome. And when it's all over and the grateful townsfolk offer them thanks, Team Rocket shrugs it off, makes a lame excuse about being in the neighborhood, and quietly slips away before anyone can actually call them heroes. Classic. One of my personal favorite low-key heroic moments is the ice cave episode. Ash and friends are trapped in a freezing mountain. Pass, temperatures dropping fast, and Pokémon in danger of succumbing to the cold. While everyone scrambles to stay warm, who comes sliding in like a budget disaster relief team? You guessed it, Team Rocket. And get this, instead of trying to swipe Pikachu mid-blizzard, they actually hand out thermal blankets and hot drinks. Meowth even makes a pot of what he calls rocket stew, which, knowing him, probably contains something questionable, but hey, it's the thought that counts. They all huddle together in a cave to stay warm. And for a brief, beautiful moment, it's just a group of weirdos surviving the night. No stealing, no blasting off, just sharing soup and stories. And here's a moment you might have missed. The Butterfree migration episode. It's already an emotional one, with Ash saying goodbye to his beloved Butterfree. But in the background of all that tear-jerking drama, Team Rocket watches from a distance. And instead of pulling a classic let's net those Butterfree and sell them for profit move, they quietly stand down. Jessie even gets misty-eyed, Meowth sniffles, and James sighs wistfully about young love. There's something about the fact that even these three chaotic crooks recognized the importance of that moment. They didn't interfere, didn't scheme. They just let it happen. It was perfect. That's the thing about Team Rocket. For all their bumbling villainy, they had this weird, unspoken code. Certain lines they wouldn't cross. Certain moments where even they understood this is bigger than us. And while the show rarely made a big deal about it, those tiny, unspoken gestures are what made them unforgettable. All right, sleepy legends, we're still not finished with their accidental hero streak. Because up next, we've got one final batch of gloriously unexpected Team Rocket save-the-day moments. And trust me, some of them will have you questioning how the heck they never got their own spin-off series as the world's worst, most lovable anti-heroes. Stay cozy, I'll meet you there. All right, Sleepy Squad, grab that pillow, scoot down under the covers, because we've arrived at the final stretch of Team Rocket's accidental heroics. And trust me, these last few moments are some of their finest, most ridiculous, and weirdly heartwarming disasters yet. Let's kick it off with a Pokémon Ranger crossover episode. Now, if you missed this one, it's basically an undercover op where a rogue Pokémon hunter is threatening to capture and exploit a rare legendary. Ash and the gang are trying to stop him, no surprises there. But guess who accidentally blows the bad guy's entire operation sky high by triggering a trap meant for Pikachu? Yep, Team Rocket. They stroll in, ready to swipe Pikachu like it's any other Tuesday, when Meowth steps on a pressure plate, setting off every alarm, opening cages and freeing dozens of Pokémon in the chaos. Suddenly, the hunter's whole base is in shambles, and before you know it, Jessie and James are being hailed as unofficial allies by the local Pokémon Rangers. You can literally see them trying to figure out whether to own it or sprint for the hills. Naturally, they chose both delivering their motto dramatically, then promptly blasting themselves off into the sunset. Peak Rocket. And then there's the episode with the injured baby Kangaskhan. In a rare moment of absolute sincerity, Team Rocket stumbles upon the poor little thing separated from its herd and trapped under some fallen logs. Now you'd expect the usual, let's capture it and sell it to the highest bidder routine, right? But nope. James immediately freaks out about how sad it looks. Jessie insists they can't leave a cute little fuzzball to suffer. And even Meowth World's grumpiest furball gets choked up. So what do? They help, they patch it up, feed it, and carry it on James's back like an awkward marsupial babysitter. And when the mama Kangaskhan finally shows up, does Team Rocket bolt? Nope. They stand there, wave goodbye, and smile. Honestly. If you're not at least a little misty-eyed, picturing James in a safari hat giving that baby Pokémon a goodbye pat, you might be made of stone. One more. Oh, you know I've got you. Let's talk about the times they teamed up with Ash's group to fight against even bigger threats. Because while they might have spent 99% of the series zapping themselves into the sky, there were moments when an even worse villain showed up like a power-hungry poacher, a corrupt gym leader, or a destructive legendary. And in those moments, Team Rocket switched sides faster than Meowth could say, "Forget stealing Pikachu. Let's not die today." There's one particular episode where a dangerous Pokemon hunter named Butch and Cassidy, the slightly more competent Rocket agents, try to unleash chaos on a small village by mind-controlling the local Pokemon. Ash and his team are cornered, outnumbered and outmatched. Just when it seems like game over, here comes Team Rocket. Not for profit, not to swipe a prize, but to settle a grudge with Butch and Cassidy. They join the fight, working side by side with Ash's crew, and for once, it's glorious teamwork. Jesse blasting henchmen with Arbok, James sending Wheezing in to smokescreen their escape, Meowth coordinating like a seasoned field commander. And at the end, no one thanks them. No one gives them a medal. They just leave, battered, broke, but weirdly proud. And in that moment, you realize these clowns were the anti-heroes we never knew we needed. And honestly, that was always the beauty of Team Rocket. Behind the goof schemes, bad disguises, and inevitable skyward explosions, they were survivors. Misfits with good hearts buried under layers of bad luck and worse decisions. And in those rare moments when they stepped up, they didn't just save the day, they reminded us that even the unluckiest weirdos have their moments to shine. All right, sleepy legends, that wraps up our countdown of Team Rocket's most unlikely hero moments, but don't even think about dozing off just yet, because we've still got one final segment coming up. A lightning-round trip through some of the most obscure, forgotten, and downright bizarre Pokémon anime moments you probably haven't thought about in years. It's going to be weird, it's going to be wonderful, and it's exactly the kind of nonsense you'll want to fall asleep to. I'll meet you there. All right, Sleepy Squad, you made it. The lights are low, your eyes are heavy, and you're just about ready to drift off. But before you do, I've got one last treat for you. A lightning-round tour through some of the weirdest, wildest, most gloriously bizarre moments the original Pokémon anime ever gave us. The kind of scenes you half remember, wonder if you dreamt them, and then realize, nope, that actually happened. And honestly, they deserve to be talked about. Let's start with one of the strangest of them all, the Pokémon Ghostbusters episode. Yep, you heard that right. There's an early episode where Ash, Misty, and Brock explore an old haunted mansion filled with ghost Pokémon like Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar. And it's not just creepy, it's borderline Scooby-Doo meets Twilight Zone. There's floating dishes, invisible hands, and get this, a scene where Ash literally dies. Well, okay. His spirit leaves his body after falling out a window, and he floats around like a happy little ghost alongside Misty and Brock's spirits too. No one ever talks about this. It's one of those, wait, what moments you almost forget until someone brings it up in the middle of the night, like now. And speaking of forgotten weirdness, remember the episode with the Pokémon Island where all the Pokémon spoke human language, not like Meowth style, talking more like. The show suddenly added voiceovers for every single Pokémon, and they had personalities. Psyduck had an awkward, nerdy voice. Pikachu spoke in full sentences. And there was a Squirtle who sounded like a streetwise New Yorker. It was surreal, hilarious, and totally unexplained. No one in the main cast noticed or acknowledged it when they reunited either. Just one of those things the show did once, and then never spoke of again. Oh, and who could forget the giant Pokémon episode? No, not Dynamax stuff. This was way before all that. There's an episode where Ash and the gang get stranded on a mysterious island populated by massive versions of regular Pokémon. Giant Bulbasaurs, enormous Charmanders, colossal Pikachu. It felt like someone slipped a Godzilla movie into the middle of your Saturday morning. Cartoons. The weird part? No one ever explains how or why those Pokémon are huge. There's no science, no plot reason. It's just big Pokémon. And I honestly respect how little sense it makes. Another underappreciated bit of glorious nonsense. The episode where James grows boobs. Yep, canon event. In one of the banned episodes that only aired in Japan and in one rare US run before getting pulled, there's a beauty contest where Jesse and James both enter. And James, for reasons known only to the anime gods, shows up wearing an inflatable bikini top complete with ridiculous cleavage. It's one of those moments you almost convince yourself you imagine, until you go back and realize, nope, it's real. It aired, and it was glorious chaos. And let's not forget the time Ash tried to fight a Mankey by punching it. No strategy, no pokeball, just straight-up hands. Little 10-year-old Ash squaring up like it's a back alley street fight. I mean, the kid gets launched into a bush immediately. But the fact that he thought, yeah, I can take this wild Pokemon and fist fight is forever iconic. Peak protagonist energy. One more before you start dozing off the episode where a ghastly creates an illusion of a vampire nurse joy. Yep, fangs, cape, creepy castle, the whole gothic horror package. There's no reason for it. It happens for about 5 minutes, scares the life out of everyone, and then the episode carries on like it was normal. Because in the early Pokemon days, nothing needed to make sense. It just had to be entertaining. All right, cozy crew that's just a taste of the glorious nonsense the Pokemon anime pulled when nobody was paying attention. And trust me, there's a lot more where that came from. In our next stretch, we're diving deeper into even stranger, forgotten moments, including Pokemon cross-dressing, borderline soap opera drama, and the time a bunch of Diglett literally broke the fourth wall. Yep, stay comfy, I'll meet you there. All right, sleepyheads hope you haven't drifted off just yet, because trust me, these next bizarre Pokemon moments are too good to sleep through. You ever have one of those memories where you're like, did I dream that, or did Pikachu actually defeat an Onix with a sprinkler system? Spoiler, he did, and we're talking about it. Let's start there. In one of the very first gym battles, Ash's Pikachu goes up against Brock's giant rock snake Onix. Now, as any Pokemon fan with a basic understanding of typing knows, electric attacks don't work on ground types. But does Ash care? Nope. Does logic matter? Also nope. Because halfway through the battle, a random sprinkler on the ceiling gets triggered by accident, soaking Onix, and suddenly Pikachu's Thunderbolt is apparently powerful enough to blast a literal boulder snake unconscious. Absolute nonsense, pure Saturday morning cartoon logic. And you know what? We loved it. Then there's the Diglett episode. If you forgot about this one, oh boy, you're in for a treat. Ash and a group of trainers are asked to help clear out a bunch of Diglett from a construction site. So naturally, everybody sends out their Pokemon, and none of them come out of their Pokeballs. At first you think it's some weird Diglett power, but no, turns out. All the Pokemon just collectively decided, nah, we like here. We're siding with the Diglett. Even Charizard, notoriously rebellious, just straight up refuses to battle. And at one point, a Diglett literally turns to the camera and gives this smug little smirk like, yeah, what of it? Classic fourth wall-breaking nonsense that no one ever talks about.
And remember that one episode where Ash gets turned into a Pikachu? Yes, it happened. Thanks to a magic spell or an experimental machine, or honestly, who even remembers? But for one glorious, bizarre episode, Ash wakes up as a Pikachu still, wearing his tiny little hat, and has to navigate life as an electric rodent. There's a weirdly emotional moment where human Ash tries to talk to Pikachu Ash. And it's bizarrely wholesome and disturbing at the same time. If you didn't see it, you probably wouldn't. Believe me. But it's real. Another underappreciated fever dream is the Jigglypuff with a vendetta. This balloon Pokemon shows up, sings everyone to sleep, gets mad when nobody applauds, and then draws mustaches and doodles on their faces. Now here's the weird part. This happens multiple times across several towns, even on other continents. It follows them like a vengeful karaoke spirit. No explanation, no backstory. Just an unstoppable marker-wielding menace. At one point, it even sings a sleeping Snorlax into submission, which honestly deserves an award. And who could forget the giant Magikarp submarine? Team Rocket once built a literal working submarine shaped like a Magikarp. It had fins, scales, and a big gaping fish mouth that opened and closed as it swam. Did it make sense? Not at all. Was it funded by their non-existent salary? Probably not, but was it amazing? Absolutely. I'd argue it's one of the most gloriously stupid vehicles in cartoon. History right up there with the Mystery Machine and Darkwing Duck's Thunderquack. Oh, and while we're at it, let's talk about the episode where Ash and the gang meet a talking Slowking. Out of nowhere, a perfectly articulate philosophical Slowking just shows up, gives Ash life advice, and casually drops deep wisdom like it's totally normal for a Pokemon to sound like a chill old man. The weirdest part? Nobody really questions it. They're just like, cool, a Slowking, and that talks. Anyway, let's go catch a Lugia. And honestly, that was the charm of early Pokemon anime. The rules were loose, to put it politely. Anything could happen. Characters broke the fourth wall.
Animals talked. Physics didn't exist. And a 10-year-old boy could outrun legendary birds and punch a primate in the face. Somehow it all worked. It was messy, hilarious, and occasionally nonsensical, but it's exactly why we still love it now. All right, sleepy legends, don't doze off yet, because up next, we're wrapping up with a few final bizarre moments, so obscure even. Hardcore fans sometimes forget they happened. You'll want to hear these before you drift off to dreamland. I'll meet you there. Okay, sleepyheads, you've made it this far, and if you're still with me, congrats. You officially have the stamina of a Snorlax during an all-you-can-eat buffet. Now let's hit a few more of those gloriously weird... Wait, did that really happen? Pokémon anime? Moments you probably haven't thought about since your last juice box. First up, the time a bunch of Pokémon literally got drunk. Yep, it happened. In an early banned episode, oh yes, there were a few, there's a festival scene where Pokémon are served what's clearly labeled as Pokémon's sake. You've got Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur chugging it down like seasoned regulars, getting red in the face and stumbling around. At one point, Pikachu lets out this woozy little hiccup, and it's honestly one of the funniest, most bizarre things the show ever animated. Naturally, it was cut from later airings, but if you caught it as a kid, you probably spent years wondering if you imagined it. Nope, it was real. And speaking of things you probably repressed, remember the pink Butterfree? Ash's Butterfree falls in love with a female. Butterfree who's pink for absolutely no explained reason. There's no mention of shinies, no backstory, just a pink one, like some kind of Valentine's Day special edition. She's got sparkly eyes and a floral scarf, and Ash's Butterfree is smitten. Honestly, it was weirdly romantic for a kid's show about battling monsters, but also adorable. And for anyone wondering, yes, that was the one Butterfree left with during his iconic goodbye scene. Tears? Oh, yeah. We cried. Now, the Tentacool and Tentacruel episode deserves a shout, too. Specifically for that scene where a skyscraper-sized Tentacruel literally slaps a building. Full-on slaps it. The animation cuts to a giant jellyfish tentacle smacking a high-rise like it owes him money. To this day, I'm not sure why it was so satisfying, but it's one of those tiny moments you remember years later and think, yep, peak, 90s anime weirdness. And of course, the scene where Ash and friends ride on a giant ancient Kabutops skeleton like it's a sled. Because why? Wouldn't you? You're stuck in a cave. Ancient fossils are lying around, and naturally the first thing you do is hop on one like you're auditioning for a prehistoric toboggan team. It makes absolutely no sense, physics be damned, but man, was it fun. Oh, and who remembers Pokémon sushi? Yeah. There was an episode where characters casually mention eating fish Pokémon, like Goldeen and Magikarp. There's even a scene where Meowth, Jesse, and James fantasize about a table piled with various Pokémon dishes. You sit there, wide-eyed, doing mental gymnastics like, wait, are people in this world just straight up eating Pokémon? It's one of those weird little details the show quietly backed away from after a while. But the fact that it happened at all makes it forever legendary. And you can't talk weird moments without bringing up the episode where Team Rocket cross-dressed as Ash and Misty. Full wigs, identical outfits, the works. James even manages to perfectly imitate Ash's voice and catchphrases. For a solid 5 minutes, it's total chaos. Ash chasing his own doppelganger, Misty shouting at a taller, mustachioed version of herself. It's one of those perfect, only in Pokémon bits of ridiculousness that makes no sense, but works because, well, it's Team Rocket. And finally, perhaps the most gloriously odd thing of all the episode where Pikachu surfs. A whole beach town treats him like a celebrity because he can ride a tiny surfboard. They even call him Picablu in one dub, which, fun fact, led to years of playground, rumors about a secret blue Pikachu evolution. Spoiler, there isn't one. But for a whole generation of kids, that surfing Pikachu was mythical. That's the thing about old-school Pokémon. It wasn't just about battles or badges. It was packed with weird, wonderful little side. Stories and one-off gags you half remember at 2 a.m. and start Googling to prove you're not crazy. And those moments, as weird as they were, are what made the show unforgettable. All right, cozy crew, fluff that pillow and get ready. Because in our final stretch coming up, we're rounding out this nostalgic marathon with a few last head-scratching moments even the most die-hard fans tend to forget. Stay cozy, I'll meet you there. All right, Sleepy Squad, if you're still hanging on with me deep into this video, you officially deserve a medal, or at least a poke puff. Now,
Let's wrap up this segment with some of the weirdest, most wonderfully bizarre Pokemon anime moments ever committed to animation. And trust me, these last few might just be the crown jewels of did that actually happen territory. Let's kick things off with one of the biggest what the heck moments. The time Meowth fought a giant robot Meowth. Yep, you heard that right. Team Rocket, for some unfathomable reason, as always, built a towering mechanical version of Meowth to terrorize a town. It was like a Pokemon-themed kaiju battle. Naturally, our sassy little Meowth wasn't having it, so what does he do? He jumps into battle against his own robot likeness, punching it, scratching it, throwing full-on tantrums about being replaced. It's wonderfully petty, delightfully weird, and one of those episodes you swear you dreamt up until you rewatch it. And speaking of giant-sized nonsense, let's not forget the Pidgeotto with a vendetta. In one particularly strange episode, a massive, angry Pidgeotto appears and starts attacking anyone who crosses its forest territory. Not unusual for a territorial bird. Pokémon, right? Well, plot twist. It turns out this Pidgeotto was supposedly jilted by its trainer years ago, and it's been holding a grudge ever since. The thing had backstory, drama, soap opera-level betrayal issues. I half expected it to turn to the camera at some point and deliver a monologue about heartbreak. Incredible. Another classic, the episode where Ash literally gets turned into stone. No, not metaphorically. Stone. It's during Pokémon, the first movie, when Mewtwo and Mew's battle gets so intense, it tears the fabric of reality itself. Ash runs in to stop it like a hero, or an idiot, or both, and gets blasted into a solid rock statue. And what brings him back? Not science. Not a max revive. Nope. Pokémon. Tears. All the gathered Pokémon start crying. Their tears float up and magically revive Ash. It's pure 90s anime melodrama, and it's still low-key makes me tear up every time I think about it. The science makes zero sense, but the emotion, top tier. Oh, and while we're here, let's give a nod to the infamous Porygon episode. You know, the one that got banned because it caused seizures in hundreds of kids in Japan. Now, the weird part is, it wasn't even Porygon's fault. It was Pikachu's thunderbolt that triggered the flashing lights. But poor Porygon got yeeted into exile, never to appear in the anime again. The real crime? It was one of the wildest, most digital cyberpunk episodes the show ever did. And it had some absolutely trippy visuals. A true lost relic. And who remembers the Delibird that constantly stalked Team Rocket? Every now and then a Delibird would pop up out of nowhere, carrying their paychecks or delivering ominous letters from Team Rocket HQ. It was like the world's weirdest debt. Collector showing up at the worst possible moments. Middle of a battle, there's Delibird, blasting off into the sky. Delibird's right, behind them, flapping away. It was low-key, one of the funniest running gags in the series. And let's wrap up this little roundup with the time Ash wrestled a literal bear. Okay, Ursering, but still. The episode's premise, a survival challenge in the woods where Ash has to fend for himself. What does he do? Stumbles upon a massive, angry Ursering, and for a hot second, genuinely squares up to fight it bare-handed before Pikachu steps in. Look, I love the kid's bravery, but buddy, that's a bear, not a caterpie. It was one of those moments you could practically hear the animators going, hey, it's fine, let's roll with the shit. And honestly, that's what made old-school Pokémon so endlessly entertaining. It didn't always make sense. It didn't have to. It was a weird, wonderful, rule-breaking cartoon universe where 10-year-olds could own dragons, jellyfish could slap skyscrapers, and a tear from a mouse could resurrect a stone statue. Pure chaotic brilliance. All right, cozy crew, you've officially made it to the final stretch of our nostalgia trip. Stay snuggled up, because in our very last section coming up, we'll close this sleepy little marathon with a soft, warm, and slightly silly goodnight send-off. I'll meet you there in a moment. Ah, Team Rocket. Just the mention of their name probably brings a smile, or at least a sleepy eye roll. Jesse, James, and Meows. The trio of misfits with more flair than function, more drama than danger, and more persistence than plot sense. Somehow, despite their terrible track record and increasingly bizarre inventions, they became something strange and unexpected, a kind of comfort. Think about it. Their sudden appearances, always mid-episode, often airborne, and inevitably sparkling with some convoluted,
plan became as familiar as the sun rising over a new region, whether they were disguised as chefs, pirates, magicians, or on one truly unforgettable occasion, literal trees. Team Rocket's presence meant one thing. We were still in that world. The world of Ash. And Pikachu. The world of adventure and friendships and badly timed net traps. But despite all their failings, and let's be honest, there were many, Team Rocket had something quietly beautiful about them. Maybe it was their resilience. Maybe it was the weird, undying loyalty they had to each other. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that they never gave up on their dream, no matter how unrealistic or deeply, wildly flawed it was. Jessie, with her dramatic flair and surprisingly tragic backstory. James, with his soft heart and endless string of sad, wealthy childhood memories. And Meowth, who somehow learned to speak, not just for convenience, but for love. There was always more depth to them than met the eye. They weren't just villains. They were, well, human, or in Meowth's case almost. And let's not forget their motto, that little theatrical poem that broke the fourth wall and soothed the viewer's mind like a strange little lullaby. To protect the world from devastation, you could practically feel your brain sigh in recognition every time it began. It wasn't just a catchphrase. It was ritual, predictable, reliable, comforting. Even when the show changed, when companions rotated and regions shifted, Team Rocket was always there, soaring in from the shadows with smoke bombs and unasked-for commentary. And while Ash and Pikachu grew, changed, matured, Team Rocket didn't. At least not in the traditional way. But maybe that's what made them special. They were the constants. The chaos that somehow kept the story grounded, like the background noise of a bustling street that reminds you you're home. Over time, something strange happened. We stopped wanting them to succeed in stealing Pikachu. Not because we didn't care for drama, but because deep down, we knew they didn't really want to either. Their role was never to win. It was to exist, to show up, fall down, and blast off again with a ding and a twinkle in the sky. Even Ash seemed to know. Their battles became less about winning and more about playing out a shared dance. A tradition. You punch, I dodge. You net, I escape. We all go flying. See you tomorrow. And isn't there something weirdly lovely about that? About being someone's constant, even if you're technically the bad guy. Jessie, James, and Meowth may have had questionable morals and even more questionable fashion choices, but their hearts were oddly pure. And perhaps most importantly, they were together, always together. As Ash's story moved toward its final pages, Team Rocket, too, began to appear less and less. Their exits were quiet, their finales understated. No grand blast-off, just a slow fade. And while the world celebrated Ash's championship, somewhere in a corner of the Pokémon world, three familiar figures probably tried one last plan. Half-heartedly, lovingly, hilariously, and failed gloriously. But they'll always be there in some corner of our sleepy minds, reciting their motto in unison, standing against moonlight, silhouetted by stars. A trio of lovable, ridiculous reminders that even the villains in our lives can be soft, silly, and, on the sleepiest nights, oddly comforting. Because even chaos, when predictable enough, can be a lullaby. And Team Rocket, well, they were our lullaby of mayhem, blasting off again somewhere, softly. It's funny to think how Team Rocket, a trio that originally burst onto the screen as bumbling antagonists, became something so much gentler over time. In the early days, sure, they were chaotic, over the top, and maybe a little bit threatening if you squinted, and ignored the fact that their plans were mostly powered by balloons and bad puns. But as the years drifted on, their menace turned to mischief, and mischief turned to routine, like the ticking of a grandfather clock or the creak of an old wooden floorboard in a familiar house. Their antics became a background rhythm to Ash's story. You knew they'd show up. You knew they'd fail. And you knew somehow that their failure would make the world feel just a little bit more whole. There was comfort in that, a strange, sleepy security. And oh, the disguises, let's not forget those masterpieces. At some point, it stopped being a question of will they fool anyone and became more of a running joke. Nurse Joy, yep, sushi chefs, of course. Giant talking vending machine. Why not? Despite being the most obvious imposters in animation history, they always gave it their all. It was performance art, accidentally brilliant, gloriously, unnecessary, and always earnest. But underneath the layers of slapstick and skyward spirals, there was heart. There always was. Jessie, for all her shouting and sass, just wanted to be respected, seen. James, with his soft spot for all things cute and tragic, longed for freedom, for acceptance. And Meowth? Well, Meowth just wanted love, to matter, to be more than what the world expected him to be. And in their strange little trio, they found that. They were a family, even when the world refused to see them that way. You could see it in their quiet moments, in the way James would cradle a rescued Pokémon with unexpected tenderness. In Jessie's rare, teary flashbacks to a childhood of neglect. In Meowth's gaze when he thought no one was watching. They weren't just comic relief. They were dreamers, lonely dreamers clinging to each other in a world that never quite made room for them. And somehow, that made them relatable, endearing, real. Because haven't we all had moments where we try too hard, where we put on a costume and hope no one sees how lost we are underneath it? Haven't we all blasted off at some point, flung from a mistake or a heartbreak twinkling away in the night, hoping tomorrow will be kinder? Team Rocket never gave up, not on their dream, not on each other, not even on us. And that resilience, wrapped in glitter and ridiculous hair flips, became their legacy. Toward the end of Ash's journey, when the pace slowed and the farewells began, we watched with soft smiles and even softer hearts as Team Rocket gently stepped out of the spotlight, not with fireworks, but with a quiet exit, a whispered motto, and a last glance toward the sky. And maybe, just maybe, they found peace too. Not in capturing Pikachu, but in realizing they didn't need to, that their story had been worth something all along. That being remembered, not for their failures, but for the joy they brought, was its own kind of success. So, as your eyes grow heavy and the world outside grows quiet, remember them. Somewhere, Jessie is brushing her hair beneath the moonlight. James is sipping tea with his Growlithe, wrapped in an oversized robe. Meowth is curled in a windowsill, dreaming of Meowsy, murmuring half-formed rhymes in his sleep. And every once in a while, if you listen close, you might hear it, to protect the world from devastation. Faint, familiar, a bedtime poem from 3 sleepy villains who never really left. You know, dreams have a funny way of stretching themselves across time. You think they've ended, and yet there they are, again soft, familiar, lingering like the scent of something you loved as a child. And that's exactly how it feels now as we drift into the quietest part of Ash and Pikachu's story. The part that doesn't air on television or play out in stadiums, but happens somewhere else entirely. Somewhere softer. Somewhere just beyond the eyelids, when the room is dark and the heart is open. Ash's final goodbye didn't feel like a hard stop. It felt like an ellipsis, like a page you tuck between the covers, not because you're finished reading, but because you want to hold on to that feeling for a little longer. He may have returned to Pallet Town, and Pikachu may have curled up in that same old bed, tail twitching in his sleep, but was that really the end? Or just a pause? Think about it. How do you really say goodbye to a dream? You don't. Not really. And that's the magic of it. Ash's journey is over, yes. The titles rolled, the theme songs faded, and the Pokeballs clicked closed one. Last time. But somewhere, out there, in some part of your memory or imagination, he's still out there walking, not chasing badges, not proving anything, just walking. Maybe through a forest where the sunlight flickers golden through the leaves. Maybe along a riverbank where squirtles play. Maybe beside a field of wind-blown flowers where Butterfree once soared away. Pikachu's there too, of course, always. Maybe they don't talk much. Maybe they don't need to. Just quiet companions now, sitting beneath a tree, sharing a sandwich, watching clouds drift by. Sometimes they visit old friends. Sometimes they meet new ones. But the need to win, to reach the top, that's faded. It's been replaced by something warmer, simpler, because eventually, every story circles back to its beginning. And maybe that's why it feels so comforting to imagine them out there still. It reminds us that even when chapters close, the love we felt for them, those childhood afternoons spent in front of a flickering screen, cheering for a 10-year-old who never gave up, those feelings don't end. They become part of us, part of our own journey. Ash's dream never really needed a destination. It was never about the title of Pokémon Master. It was about discovery, about heart, about waking up each day with curiosity, with hope, with a best friend by your side, and a world full of wonder ahead. That's a dream worth having. And now it's your dream too, passed quietly into your hands, not for battles or tournaments, but for courage, for kindness, for connection, for the joy of the journey, not just the finish line. So even as the screen fades to black and the lull of sleep pulls gently at your thoughts, remember, the dream hasn't ended. It's just changed form. Ash and Pikachu may be resting now, but in your heart, and perhaps somewhere just beyond the stars, they're still out there, smiling, exploring, dreaming, just like you, somewhere, not bound by map or memory. There's a place where all of it still lives. The winding paths of Kanto, the silver lakes of Johto, the lava-carved cliffs of Hoenn. They aren't gone. They're just quieter now, like a storybook gently closed, resting on a nightstand. You can always open it again, turn to any page, and there they'll be. Ash with his slightly crooked cap, Pikachu with a spark in his eyes, ready, smiling, timeless. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of all of this, that in the quiet, these moments grow louder. When you're not chasing the next gym or rushing to the next city, you start to remember the little things. The way Ash always got hungry at the worst times. The way Pikachu stubbornly refused to evolve. Not out of defiance, but loyalty. The campfires under starlit skies. The silly misunderstandings. The tears no one expected. The hugs that said more than words ever could. These aren't just memories from a cartoon. They're fragments of feeling tucked into the folds of childhood. And whether you were 5 or 15 when you met Ash and Pikachu, their presence gently wrapped itself around your heart, not as fantasy, but as reassurance. That being kind mattered, that believing in yourself mattered, that even when things didn't go your way, you could still keep going. You could still smile. And now, all these years later, as you lie here with your blanket pulled close and the world finally quiet, maybe you realize they were not just characters on a screen. They were something steadier, softer, something you could carry with you without even realizing it. The dream never had to be loud. In fact, it's more powerful when it whispers, like now. Maybe Ash walks slower these days. Maybe he spends more time watching sunsets than chasing them. But Pikachu still rides on his shoulder, leaning in close. They still nod to the wind, wave to passing clouds, and laugh at things no one else would find funny. Maybe they're not heading anywhere in particular anymore. Maybe they don't need to. The world they helped shape is blooming all around them. New trainers, new Pokémon, new beginnings. And still, there they are. In the background, smiling, watching, proud. They gave us so much, and now they rest. But only in the way dreams rest, curled up, eyes closed, gently breathing, waiting to be remembered again. So whenever you need to feel brave or when you miss something you can't quite name, just close your eyes. Picture that old path, that flash of yellow, that hopeful grin beneath a cap. They're still there. The dream never ends. It simply waits for you to return. Well, look at you, sleepyhead. If you're still listening right now, whether you're curled up under a blanket, sprawled out on the couch, or pretending to pay attention while your cat walks across your phone screen, I just want to say you're an absolute legend. You've officially made it through 2 whole hours of iconic, weird, and wonderfully nostalgic Pokémon moments. And honestly, that deserves a badge. Not a Boulder badge, not a Thunder badge. A Sleepy badge, awarded exclusively to those brave enough to stay awake through an entire late-night Pokémon nostalgia session. It's kind of wild when you think about how much nonsense this show packed into those old episodes, isn't it? Giant jellyfish smacking, skyscrapers, Pikachu breaking the laws of physics weekly, Team Rocket somehow being both villains and secret softies, and, of course, Ash, our forever 10-years-old boy with the reflexes of a ninja and the decision-making skills of a sleep-deprived toddler. And the best part? Even with all its weirdness, its plot holes, its weight. How did that work again? Moments. It's still one of the most comforting, feel-good shows ever made. Because at the end of the day, Pokémon wasn't just about battles or catching them all. It was about friendship, adventure, ridiculous cross-dressing heists, giant Magikarp submarines, and those weird little filler episodes you barely remembered until tonight. I love that about this series. The fact that for every epic Mewtwo showdown, there was an episode where Meowth tried to sell ice, cream, or where Ash wrestled a bear, or where Jigglypuff casually drew mustaches on the entire town and peaced out. It's that mix of epic and idiotic that made Pokémon, well, Pokémon. And you know what? I hope as you're listening to this, whether you're already halfway to dreamland or still propped up on one, elbows smiling at all the memories, that you feel a little lighter, a little cozier, like you just spent the night swapping old cartoon stories with a good friend. Because that's what these videos are for, not just to pass the time, but to remind us of the silly stuff we loved and the joy in remembering it together. And can we take a second to appreciate how absolutely feral 90s and early 2000s cartoons were? I mean, name another show besides Pokémon where it was totally normal for a giant Tentacruel to wage war on a city one episode and then have a Pikachu surfing competition the next. Zero consistency, maximum entertainment. Honestly, the writers were just out here doing whatever they wanted, and I respect that energy. And speaking as of respect, massive props to you for sticking it out through all 6 segments. Through the ghostly hauntings, the weird filler episodes, the banned content, the cross-dressing James shenanigans, and every single instance of Team Rocket getting blasted into the sky like a pair of cartoon bottle rockets. Seriously, if I could hand-deliver each of you a badge right now, I would. Or at least a Poke Puff. Or a cup of warm moo-moo milk. But since I can't, just know this. You're part of the coziest little community on the internet. A sleepy squad of night owls, nostalgia lovers, and undercover Pokémon nerds who come together in the middle of the night to remember the weird, wonderful nonsense of our childhoods. All right, before we start wrapping things up proper, I gotta ask again. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I swear, seeing comments pop up from folks in Tokyo at 3 a.m., someone in New York at 9 p.m., and another person in Sydney just starting their day. It never stops being magical. Drop it in the comments below. It's like a sleepy little global campfire, and you're officially invited to hang around anytime you want. Okay, that's enough rambling from me for now. But don't worry, we're not quite done yet. I've still got a few more thoughts to share before I send you off to sleep or to your next YouTube spiral. So keep those blankets tucked in, eyes heavy, and I'll meet you in the next little stretch.
All right, still with me? Good. I figured you might be, even if you're half asleep with one headphone dangling out and a pillow, threatening to swallow your face whole. And honestly, that's exactly how these late-night nostalgia marathons are meant to be. Enjoy it. Pajamas on, room dimly lit. Maybe a cup of something warm nearby and a steady stream of... Wait, did that actually happen in Pokémon? Moments rolling by like soft, sleepy waves. You know, one of my favorite things about revisiting old cartoons like this isn't just remembering the big, iconic battles or emotional moments, though, let's be real. We all still get a little misty-eyed thinking about Ash saying goodbye to Butterfree. No, it's those tiny, weird, wonderfully pointless side plots and one-off characters that somehow lodge themselves into our brains forever. Like that one rich kid with a yacht made entirely out of solid gold. Or the random Viking scene during the Pokémon, the first movie, where Brock, dead serious, says, "I didn't know Vikings still existed." And Ash replies, "They mostly live in Minnesota." I mean, what was that? Who wrote that? And why does it still live rent-free in my head decades later? And you know what? I wouldn't trade those memories for anything. Because back then, watching Pokémon wasn't about continuity, or plot holes, or whether something made sense. It was about coming home after school, grabbing a snack, probably something, wildly unhealthy, and diving headfirst into a world where logic took a backseat to pure chaotic fun. Where one week you'd be battling a gym leader, and the next you'd be fighting off a literal army of rampaging executor. No explanation, no apology, just vibes. And I hope that's what you felt here tonight, too. That same sense of harmless, delightful nonsense we all grew up on. A little reminder that sometimes it's okay for stories to be weird, for heroes to make dumb decisions, for villains to blast off yet again. Because in a world that can get way too serious way too fast, we need those bits of light-hearted ridiculousness to balance things out. Plus, let's be honest, half the reason we watched wasn't even for the battles. It was for Team Rocket's dramatic motto, entrances, or seeing how many new ways Pikachu could electrocute them into the stratosphere, or just waiting to see what absolutely unhinged plan Jesse, James, and Meowth would come up with next. Stealing Pokémon, child's play. These people built submarines, hot air balloons, underground tunnels, ice cream machines, and an amusement park. All for a single electric mouse. The dedication? Honestly inspiring. And hey, speaking of inspiring, it's kind of amazing how many of us still carry a little piece of those weird old episodes with us. Whether it's the theme song popping into your head at random, "I want to be the very best, like no one ever was," or catching yourself making a Pikachu face emoji when you're surprised. It sticks with you in the best possible way. So, wherever you're listening from tonight, whether you're in a tiny dorm room, a cozy apartment, a childhood bedroom decorated with faded Pokémon stickers, or somewhere completely unexpected, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for being part of this sleepy little trip down memory lane, for making it through every single remember that time when moment and probably laughing at least once at the sheer absurdity of it all. Because in the end, that's what makes this weird little fandom so special. It isn't just the battles or the badges or even the legendary Pokémon. It's us, the sleepy-eyed kids who grew up with it, still finding comfort in those old episodes and still nerding out over which gym badge was the coolest. It's the Cascade badge, by the way. Don't me. All right, cozy crew, I can feel the sleepiness setting in. Blankets are probably half kicked off. One arm's gone numb under the pillow. Maybe your phone's at 4% battery, which means it's the perfect time to start wrapping things up. But don't worry, I've got a few more words to send you off properly. Stay right there, tucked in and comfy, because our final little good night is coming up next. And now, sleepyheads, it's time. Time to let those heavy eyelids win. To drift off into whatever weird, wonderful dreams your brains. Cooking up tonight maybe a surfing Pikachu race. Or Meowth finally landing a decent pay raise. Whatever it is, I hope it's soft, silly, and exactly the kind of nonsense you deserve after a long day. Thanks for hanging out with me in this little corner of the internet, where nostalgia's always welcome and bedtime stories come with Team Rocket slogans. Until next time, keep chasing those dreams, both the big ones and the wonderfully dumb cartoon ones. Good night, legends.